searching for CRI Learn Chinese.
Open to in-person learning in regions where it's permitted, and following calls to do so, some teachers will now begin to receive their COVID-19 vaccines as early as next week, including those in high-risk neighborhoods of Toronto and Peel. Vaccines will also be administered in high-risk neighborhoods, including faith-based locations and workplaces for people aged 18 and up.
Hope is on the horizon. I promise you that better days are ahead of us.
Brianna Carnegie, Global News.
In addition to the stay-at-home order, who becomes eligible for vaccines has changed significantly. The province says hotspots and teachers will be the focus beginning right away, with more adults having access to vaccines quicker. Global Dave Woodard has more on what changes in this new update.
Immediately, mobile vaccination clinics will be into hotspots in Toronto and Peel.
Vaccines will be eligible for people aged 18 years of age and over in the high-risk neighborhoods.
And then next week, Premier Ford announced that education workers who deal directly with special needs students, as well as those teachers who work in the hotspot neighborhoods of Toronto and Peel, will become eligible to get the vaccine, with plans to expand into other hard-hit areas as soon as supply allows. The Premier says he has high hopes for this new vaccine schedule.
I'm expecting that we will be able to have 40% of Ontario adults vaccinated by the end of the 4-week stay-at-home order.
Dave Woodard, Global News.
Well, Health Minister Christine Elliott says the province has not yet finalized the protocols to deal with who gets life-saving treatment should intensive care units get overrun with COVID-19 patients. Well, as of tonight, there are over 500 patients in ICUs across the province, the highest ever. Christine Elliott says the province has not made any changes to indemnify doctors who may soon be put in the position of deciding who to give critical care to.
There are some emergency protocols that are out there. However, we have not finalized any of that yet. We want to make sure that we put all of our efforts right now into making sure that we can have that capacity.
Well, back in January, hospitals were sent guidelines on how to deal with ICU overflow, which ranked patients on their likelihood to survive a year after the onset of critical illness. Well, human rights advocates have criticized the process, saying it is inherently discriminatory, especially towards people with disabilities and seniors. Well, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization is standing by its emergency recommendation to extend the delivery of second doses of COVID-19 vaccines up to 4 months. NACI Vice Chair Dr. Shelley Deeks says it's not unusual for recommendations around the use of vaccines to change over time.
It's not unusual for us in the immunization world to adjust programs as vaccines become better in use in populations because we learn more as we go.
Well, the 4-month recommendation was made in early March because vaccine supplies were limited and the experts felt getting some protection to more people faster was needed. And the COVID-19 pandemic has hit Canada's intelligence service with its director testing positive for the virus. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stevenson, has exclusive details.
Global News has learned that Canada's top spy, CHOMO'S Director David Vigneault, has contracted COVID-19. The agency says that Vigneault is now working from his home. The news the director's illness comes after multiple intelligence sources approached Global News, raising concerns about workplace safety at CSIS during the pandemic. The spy service, responsible for monitoring threats to Canada's national security, requires all employees to physically come into work at the office. In a statement to Global News, CSIS cited the sensitive nature of intelligence work as the reason why there is not a work-from-home option. But some of Canada's spies question that logic, pointing out that similar agencies have figured out secure work-from-home options, including Canada's Signals Intelligence Agency, known as CSAC, the RCMP, and the military.
Toronto's biggest interviews on demand at 640toronto.com. In sports, the Blue Jays dropped the rubber match of their 3-game set against the Texas Rangers today 2-1. Toronto now heads back to Dunedin for their home opener against the LA Angels tomorrow night. In the meantime, the Maple Leafs are taking on the Habs in Toronto right now, with the game in the third period with around 2 minutes left to go. The Leafs lead the Habs 3-2. Taking a look at the forecast now from the Global News Weather Center. Skies staying clear tonight with an expected overnight low of 9. I'm Darren Boland. This is Global News.
Will have to be roped off. Premier Ford, though, facing tough questions about why he waited until now. It was 3 weeks ago that the third wave was declared.
The capacity of the ICUs and these variants have taken off even beyond what they told us. And the second I found out yesterday, immediately I asked him to start writing up the orders.
And the Premier not budging on sick days. He again referred everyone to that federal program that's in place. I'm Richard Southern.
This stay-at-home order getting mixed reaction. The head of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses saying small operations are already struggling because of the existing.
All dealing with around the world, that's why it's called a pandemic. I don't know why the world isn't taking Brazil a lot closer to Canada than China. And many people from Brazil integrate with people from Canada and vice versa.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why we don't take Brazil more seriously. A quote from a doctor in Brazil. If Brazil is not under control, then the planet, that would include Canada. If Brazil is not under control, then the planet is not going to be safe, because we are brewing new variants every single week. And they are going to cross borders. We know that a variant called the Brazilian variant is in BC, it's in Alberta, it's in Ontario. And we think it's in the Vancouver Canucks. That's still to be tested. But the Vancouver Canucks haven't played a single game this month. And they may not play any games this month.
680's Madison Fitzpatrick joins us live with more. Madison.
Yeah, Michelle, Education Minister Stephen Lecce says schools across the province will remain open. The minister touts how well the school...
Young, and they're very sick. So I'm just not going to sit here and bitch about how the rest of the world isn't paying attention.
Oh, you said bitch on the radio.
We're going to pay attention. So let me just give you a few slivers of what is in a BBC report. It's all on my Twitter timeline. You go to @Cheryl's Edley if you're on Twitter, and you'll find it very close to the top.
There you go.
Here's the headline. And this is tonight's news. Whether others want to cover it or not, this is tonight's international story. COVID. Brazil has more than 4,000 deaths in 24 hours for the first time. Now, you're always used to hearing, whether it's Alberta, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, British Columbia, whatever, you're always hearing about the cases, about infections. And you hear about over 1,000 infections in Alberta and over 1,000 infections in British Columbia. I think today in BC was just under 1,000. And you hear about 3,000 in a day in Ontario. This isn't infections. I have no idea how many infections they had in Brazil the last 24 hours. These are deaths. Can you imagine what we would be experiencing in our minds, in our hearts, in our neighborhoods, if we were getting 4,000 deaths in just one day? But that's happening in Brazil right now. Brazil has recorded more than 4,000 COVID-related deaths in 24 hours as a more contagious variant fuels a surge in cases. Hospitals overcrowded, people dying as they wait for treatment. In some cities, the health system is on the brink of collapse. The country's total death toll now, 337,000, second only to the States. The president of Brazil, Bolsonaro, his name, continues to oppose any lockdown measures to curb the outbreak. And by the way, Lori Goldstein is joining us in about 22 minutes from Toronto. He's not into lockdowns, doesn't believe in lockdowns. He says the only way to beat COVID is with mass vaccinations. We need more vaccine and we need better implementation of the vaccine strategy, is what Lori Goldstein says in his latest column, and Lori will be joining us, as I say, in a little over 22 minutes from now. Next hour, by the way, the outgoing mayor of Calgary, the most articulate elected public servant in Canada, in my opinion, Naheed Nenshi, joins us next hour. Speaking to supporters outside the presidential residence on Tuesday, the president of Brazil said he criticized quarantine measures and suggested without evidence. I said, without evidence, because that's what demagogues do. They don't care about evidence. Suggested without evidence that the deaths were linked to obesity and depression. Thousands of people dying every day. In the mind of the demagogue who runs Brazil, Bolsonaro, it's all about people being too fat and too depressed. To date, Brazil has recorded more than 13 million cases of coronavirus, according to their health ministry. And I could go on, but here's the largest point you need to take away from this. Dr. Miguel Nicolas, who's been closely tracking cases in his country, Brazil, told the BBC, Brazil now is a threat to the entire effort of the international community to control the pandemic. If Brazil is not under control, then the planet is not going to be safe because we're brewing new variants every week and they are going to cross borders. So next time someone says to you, how come no one's talking about Brazil? You tell them Chuck's talking about it at the national kitchen table in this show. And clearly I can give a huge fat plug to the BBC. They're covering it. So you can get a link to their website and put it wherever you put your links and follow it. Because what happens in Brazil will impact on this country. And they're producing new variants every week. We'll talk to a Toronto doctor who's on the front lines about all this later on tonight. And we'll talk about Brazil, no doubt. We'll talk about lockdowns. We'll talk about the younger people in ICUs and vaccinations and more. What I want to do right now is run a clip of Anthony Fauci, who was on CNN tonight, talking about vaccinations and herd immunity and how and when we get there. And this is the preeminent person on science, on pandemic science. This is Anthony
What you're talking
Fauci.
about is a theory.
You still have a considerable risk there that we need to get by.
So what is it known or clear what percentage of the population needs to be vaccinated or fully vaccinated in order to kind of cross that threshold?
There's people now.
You know, the honest answer is no. It's going to be a combination of people who are vaccinated
HIV
and
resistant.
those who have been infected and have successfully recovered and are immune to reinfection,
not many of them,
with the wild type virus that infected them in the first place. This is a very elusive number, this issue of herd immunity. It varies from disease to disease. It varies on the ability and the efficiency of transmission from person to person. And it varies with the efficacy of the vaccine. I've said multiple times that my estimate, and I have to underscore, Anderson, it's only an estimate, that it's somewhere between 70 and 85% of the population where you have a combination of people who are vaccinated.
Yeah, but what stops the other 15% from getting it, and what stops the first 85% from getting variants?
Mystical number. The more and more people you get vaccinated, the closer and closer you get to control. So you may get to 50% of the people vaccinated.
We're dealing with one virus. I don't think people understand what we're dealing with.
To the point where you have a marked diminishing of the number of infections per day.
If it was one virus, some of that might be fixed, but it's not. So what magically stops the other 15% from getting sick? Because the animals are still going to have this shit. And what protects the first 85% or whatever from the variants?
Knock you off that pedestal. Check out the images of two other suspects, including a young woman holding a gas can at 680news.com. I'm Mark Douglas. 680 News Time, 10:14.
Hi, it's Fido. When it comes to downloading maps to find...
So what I did today was I read it again.
So I said there's people that are HIV immune or whatever in Congo, for example. There's others too, but there's like a very small number out of all the people that died of HIV or whatever kills them after they get it, because it's not you. The virus itself doesn't technically kill you. That's another story. There's a few that have got herd immunity, but all the other people die. So
I'm not disparaging them, by the way. They can sound great. They can get you what you need.
my people are basically immune to smallpox, or we'd be dead. That's herd immunity.
Need my material without thinking.
Your inoculation's expired, and then you sold smallpox to I forget which government. It's kind of like the anthrax and the mutated anthrax and all that shit.
Experience of the patient and the patient's experience of COVID-19 in a moment right here. Thank you so much for joining us. Charles Adler tonight.
Don't miss your daily fix of Canadian common sense. Subscribe to the Charles Adler Tonight podcast for free on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts.
If you're on the hunt for a new truck, we'll make it easy for you. Because when it comes to performance, style, and capability, there's only one choice: Ram. During the month of Ram, you get 20% off MSRP with up to $12,950 in total discounts on select 2021 Ram 1500 Classic models. Plus, up to $3,000 in loyalty cash for select owners. The perfect truck, the perfect price, the perfect time. Consider the search over. See your Ram dealer for details.
Oh no, I chipped my diamond.
Spence will replace it.
Oh no, I cracked my diamond.
Spence will replace it.
Oh no, I lost my diamond.
Spence Diamonds will replace it. Every time. If you lose, chip, or crack your Spence Diamond from its original setting, we'll replace it at no extra charge.
Okay, when's the fast-talking lawyer coming in?
No fast-talking lawyer. As long as you bring in your ring for annual inspections, we've got you covered. Guaranteed for a lifetime.
That's a long time.
Lifetimes usually are. Spence Diamonds. Find us.
Gardner also off limits.
Time for 680 Sports. It's Brendan.
That racket should wake up the ghost of Hamlet.
No answer.
So Nick Carter's trusty picklock will do the trick.
Nick Carter. It's horrible.
Oh, it's flat as pitch in there.
Stay right beside me.
Seems to me I heard that one before tonight. And look, Nick, I marked my shins in the dark in that character's office. And so if you don't mind, this time I'd like to see where I'm going.
Okay, Betsy.
Oh, yeah. It felt kind of like that.
Winning with OLG brings out all the feels. Play today at olg.ca.
45 back.
All bright and sunny.
Curious Cast Podcast Network. Like Nighttime. Join host Jordan Bonaparte for true crime, mysteries, paranormal, and the weird from all across Canada. From music to history to true crime and more. It's all waiting for you now for free at curiouscast.ca and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.
Laid off due to COVID-19? You are entitled to full...
Terminating you, and you are owed full severance pay. I can help you get the severance.
They're actually owed. Get the compensation you need. Go to employmentlawyer.ca.
If you accept any changes, contact me and discover why my employment law firm is the most...
EE Elevator will set up a maintenance program.
Jesus Christ, man.
Through today. Get the advice you need and the compensation you deserve. Visit employmentlawyer.ca. That's employmentlawyer.ca.
680 News Time, 10:18. Canada's National Advisory Committee on Vaccines is sticking with its advice that provinces wait up to 4 months to give people their second dose of COVID vaccines.
A month after the National Advisory Committee on Immunization first recommended the 4-month gap between doses, it's confirming that advice, saying real-world evidence and new research shows the shots are still effective with this interval. Dr. Shelley Deeks, vice chair of NACI, says the goal here is simple.
Getting first dose in as many arms as quickly as possible to protect as many people as possible.
She adds as vaccine supplies increase, that gap could be cut in half. Pharmaceutical companies oppose the delay, instead recommending the second dose in less than a month. Many immunologists and researchers also expressing concern, saying this risks creating a new variant. But chair of NACI, Dr. Caroline Quast-Tan,
thank you.
Research shows that's not a problem.
The risk is actually not seen. If it's less than the risk of not vaccinating more people with one dose.
That doesn't even make sense. Your reasoning doesn't make sense. Your reasoning does not make logical sense. You get partially vaccinated. The vaccine's not as good as natural immunity. Well, that doesn't make sense. You have to get sick to get your immunity, right? You're making it so you won't kill off, although you will be breeding mutations. Even fully vaccinated people shed live virus if they get exposed.
So as I was saying during the Canadian Common Sense, I was having a bit of a tough time with this thread last night. First of all, I want to thank Paula Simons for retweeting it. It's from a critical care nurse, ICU nurse, Toronto. And I'm going to do my best to get through most of it tonight, because I think it, better than anything else I've seen in a long time, gives you a real window into the experience of a frontline professional and a patient. And so she writes, my patient Tim was admitted with COVID, a relatively healthy guy, exercises more than I do, if you don't count the steps I put in at work. It's rare that COVID patients are already intubated before coming to the ICU, which can be both a blessing and a curse. But it does give us a chance to get to know our patients. Tim was doing okay with self-proning. He watched his oxygen levels, flipped himself over for tummy time to get them up again when they were low. He's been here for weeks, so he knows the drill.
What are you talking
I try
about?
hard to connect with my patients on some level, either through food, family, music. Helps them relate to me. Reminds them that I'm human too. It's paramount to build trust.
Fucking virus. Holy
Construction, and this report brought to you by Hickory Dickory Decks. If you're Toronto bound on the QEW over top the Burlington Skyway, it's single file, single lane, so that's causing a slowdown here. Watch yourself on the eastbound Gardner. Your ride will end at York. It's closed eastbound tonight from York to the DVP until around 6.
Is it so much work just trying to breathe? Can't concentrate on eating too. He says soup with a cheddar cream base with the perfect blend of spices and fresh broccoli was the last thing he ate before he lost his sense of smell and taste.
Bullshit! How come nobody reports that? You keep telling us it's the number one
in the Express, 2 left lanes shut down. We also have a crash blocking a ramp to Islington. And
no
on the
point did I
westbound
lose
401,
my
the
sense
McCowan
of
ramp to the
smell.
highway is long, as well as the northbound Kennedy ramp to the west 401, all shut down for the overnight. And then minor delays through the Construction Avenue Road to the Allen in the collectors. They've got 3 left lanes shut down. Celebrating over 30 years of custom decks and happy customers, Hickory Dickory Decks offers the widest selection of low-maintenance decking. Enjoy life outdoors. Visit decks.ca. Next report at 10:31 with the forecast. Here's Natasha Renza.
8 degrees tonight, mainly clear. Now that wind off the lake out of the east to southeast, the direction doesn't change, but the intensity does a little bit, a bit stronger, up to 50 kilometers per hour. 20 degrees, of course, that's cooler near the lake, about 14 degrees lakeside. And then some light rain Friday morning, but the afternoon is great for getting outside. The sun will be back out with a high of 18 degrees. And then Saturday, partly cloudy, increasing cloud through the evening, but staying.
The wind's coming directly out of the west.
Downtown Toronto this hour, clear and 14 degrees. Same conditions at Pearson International Airport. Coming up at 10:30, we will have all the details of your stay-at-home order, which goes into effect just over, 93 minutes from now. And we also have news from the eastbound Gardner Expressway, which is closed this hour from York to the DVP. Will stay that way until the morning, but it is all part of the fully reopening of the Gardner Expressway, which is expected on Monday. We'll have the details on these stories and much more straight ahead. 680 news time, 10:24.
What are you making, hon?
And artichoke soup with fresh thyme.
I love our Vitamix.
They literally have to get concrete off that thing.
Decide not to waste it. Just as I'm sitting down to eat, my coworker comes in and says, "Oh, does that taste as good as?"
So I know this is bull. You fit all this into a tweet.
I just sob, threatening to burst. I can't do anything about the stroke. I can't do anything about COVID. I can't do anything about the public perception of COVID. What I do now is I ordered my favorite soup and let my senses take in all the deliciousness it has to offer.
Wow, that's...
We're here for you on your radio, online, and on your smart speaker.
This is 680 News.
I see. You'll be getting it himself before long. Thanks to Nick Carter. I want to tell you something. Of all the criminals I've tracked down, catching Ramsey gave me the most pleasure. A fellow like that, trading on the patriotism of school kids, is about the lowest rep in the world. Why, bad as the Nazis are. A guy like this is worse.
You're right, Nick.
You said it, Nick. Well, now you've got all the evidence you need. The package of posters in the next room, the package of stickers here, and the confession. Right, Nick? We can take over from here. Thanks. Okay, Riley. So long. So long, Nick. So long, Patsy.
Hello, Lieutenant.
Well, Patsy, come on. Chin up. Carry on and all that sort of thing.
It's not my chin that's worrying me, Nick. It's having to walk down those 10 flights of stairs again. That'll be the 4th trip tonight.
Why, Patsy. And at your age, too.
Look, Nick, Can't we just sit here on the top step for the next 6 hours?
You think you'd be rested enough then to walk down the 10 flights?
I think that by then the elevators will be running again.
Last year, the Masters were held in November, but this year it's back at its normal April date. The world's best are teeing it up at a
Jesus Christ.
Don't play.
This has been another of the strange adventures of Nick Connor, Master Detective, which are brought to you regularly each week at the same time by WOR Mutual. Now, tell us a little about next week's story, Nick. Well, next week's story includes rather more adventure than actual detecting.
But if Nick hadn't been able to make the first few deductions that really started him off on the right track, there would have been no adventure.
And there was adventure.
That's 4 free.
That's when I met Dr. Donaldson and any other time in my career.
This Dr. Donaldson was a specialist in secret and dangerous poison, and he tried one of them out on Nick.
Well, in the end, I managed to get the better of him and solve a mystery that had the police completely stumped.
We call it the empty coffin because it was an empty coffin that gave us the first clue.
And it was 2 different doctors making out 2 separate death certificates for the same death that led to that first clue. Well, that's enough for now. Join us next week for the story of the empty coffin. So long.
So long, folks.
And Doug Ford is cutting $800 million from schools. And he's privatizing, making virtual learning permanent, taking away money needed for smaller classes and supports for students. Ontario has a world-class public school system. Tell the Ford Conservatives to stop using this crisis to pull it apart. A message from the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario.
Now business, here's Richard. Good evening. The record run by Canada's main stock index continued on what was a quiet day of trading.
Canada stocks are down.
As investors took a pause between the end of first quarter earnings and the beginning of second quarter earnings next week. The TSX today was up 24 points. Record finish at 19,129. A 3.7% gain for convenience store chain Alimentation Couche-Tard helped push consumer staples higher. Gildan Activewear, the sock and t-shirt maker, was higher by 3%. Canada stocks down, Aurora falling 6.4%. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial Average edged up 16 points to 33,446. S&P up 3, the Nasdaq fell 9. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said he's optimistic about the U.S. economic outlook in his annual letter that's closely followed by market watchers. JP Morgan stock up 1.5%. Elsewhere, Apple up 1.3%, $127.90. We know investors are looking for alternative investments more than ever these days. They're finding some unusual things. 3 items went for big money at auctions recently. One was a postcard from the Titanic. It sold for $15,000. It was signed Love Jack, a postcard sent by a hero on the Titanic, Jack Phillips, who was the wireless operator. Meantime, a rare Superman comic sold for $3.25 million, a mint issue of Action Comics #1 when they introduced Superman. And finally, a forgotten copy of the Super Mario Brothers video game that was bought in 1986 but forgotten about in a desk drawer, sold for $660,000. Why can't we ever find something like that hanging around the house, eh? Canadian dollar, it was down just over 1/4 cent, 79.25 cents US. The big top stories are next on 680.
When your bank account does more, your money does more, so you can live more too. Switch to the Scotiabank Ultimate Package and get a savings rate of up to 1.8%, unlimited Interac e-transfer transactions, an annual credit card fee waiver on select credit cards, and a $300 welcome bonus. It's the bank account that lets you do more, all from one package. Conditions apply. Rate is for a limited time and varies by savings period. Visit scotiabank.com/ultimate300. Scotiabank.
The York Catholic teachers remind all motorists that during spring break, you're likely to encounter kids playing outside. Slowing down near playgrounds in residential areas is our best bet of making sure a child's natural exuberance doesn't lead to a tragedy. Let's all do what we can to make sure this spring break is a safe and happy one for our children. This message is brought to you by the York Catholic teachers, a caring voice in our caring community.
680 News Time, 10:30.
Toronto's #1 for breaking news, traffic, and weather. This is 680 News.
Good evening. This is Wednesday, April 7th. I'm Michelle Morton.
I'm Scott Burnett. Here's what's making news right now.
The province is moving into a stay-at-home order at midnight and plenty of reaction.
Reaction to the province-wide stay-at-home order is mixed. The head of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says it will be devastating for small businesses, but according to Peel Stop Doctor, it's what we need right now.
Schools across the province get the green light to stay open despite some GTA school boards deciding to shift to remote learning.
Heads up if you're on the road downtown, the eastbound Gardner Expressway is closed between York and the DVP for construction.
Toronto police lay charges for a stunt driving rally where the road was set on fire.
There's always somebody in the crowd that wants to see you get arrested.
And images of other suspects have been released.
We've got a big trade ahead of the NHL's trade deadline. That comes Monday. Will the Blue Jays falter against the Rangers? Sports at 45.
TSX higher, notching another all-time high finish, plus never going back. How many workers say they'd rather quit than give up their work-from-home business at 56?
680 News Time, 10:31.
Time for traffic and weather together on the ones. Good evening, Craig Gear.
Good evening.
2 years ago, 2 years ago, all these people wanted this type of work arrangement.
Investigation.
I know there's a lot of experts who claim they're drug recognition. People said, oh, they should have drawn blood or done this or done that. And without the signs of impairment, we don't get to the point where we can actually author a search warrant and develop the probable cause to get that.
This is the third time Woods has been involved in a vehicle investigation. From the Global News Desk, I'm Skylar Peters.
He was doing 85 at a 45.
This is Charles Adler Tonight. Once again, here is Charles Adler.
He's got to try
reading about it.
Always the same way. This year we sent 3 cards to people who didn't send us any. Oh, well. We got plenty, Daddy.
The only cure, Lori Goldstein, Toronto's Sun. Simple reality is, he writes, that politicians and medical officers of health can keep locking us down into eternity. It is not going to defeat COVID-19. The only way out is through the mass inoculation of the population as fast as possible, where Canada is lagging far behind comparable countries to our own. Lori Goldstein, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Charles. Good to be here.
Hi there. We've heard about these countries that have been incredibly successful fighting COVID. We hear about Australia, we hear about New Zealand. Both of them have done lockdowns. I know you read the same content. So what is it about what they've done with their very, very serious stay-at-home lockdowns that you don't believe in? Or, and this is the, A-B question, or is it the kind of lockdowns we've done in Canada that you don't believe in, Laurie?
Yeah, it's the latter. We're in Ontario in our third, whatever they're calling it, lockdown, shutdown, circuit breaker, blah, blah, blah. In Toronto, we've essentially been in lockdown since mid-November. But they haven't been the kind of lockdowns that occurred in countries that were successful in containing the spread. And, use example of Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan was very successful. But, we're a democracy. We're not going to do that. It's just, look at all the democracies. They're not going to do the kind of, particularly in Canada, the kind of lockdown that would be necessary, which is basically, you confine people to their homes, and you have the army patrolling the streets, so you have the police, closing off the highways. That's not going to happen here. And so what we've had is these series of partial lockdowns. And I was reading over the Ontario law today, and the legal basis for these kinds of things. And basically it has one sentence that says Okay, nobody can go anywhere, right? And then the rest of it is exceptions. It's just exception after exception after exception. So, look, I wish they would have worked. They did, to be fair, they did help us to have our rates lower, for example, than the United States and the UK in the first year of the lockdown. Like we were in much better shape in terms of lower death rates, lower infection rates, those kinds of things. But since the vaccines have started being widely distributed, late last year, early this year, there's no comparison. The rates in the UK and the United States of infection are falling dramatically compared to Canada, and it's all about and it's directly related to how many people that each country has vaccinated. We vaccinated about 16% of the Canadians with at least one dose. The United States is double that, and the UK is almost triple that. And the UK in January, their new cases per million of population were way above Canada's, and now they're way below. And in the United States, similarly, they were way above us at the start of the year, and now we're just about at the same rate of infection. But the U.S. is going down and we're going up, so it's not going to be long before our infection rate is greater than the Americans. And it's all, you just look at it, it's all related to how many people you vaccinate and how quickly you can do it.
So inoculated people don't pass on the virus the way other people do, and certainly inoculated people don't pass on the virus to other inoculated people. I mean, this is so simple, and I want to understand why something that is really just elementary logic is so difficult for so many to understand.
Yeah, look, I understand the vaccine hesitancy and all that. We have friends who are hesitant. And of course there are complications. The experts are not quite sure that if you have the vaccine, it stops you from spreading to somebody who isn't vaccinated. That's why they still want us to wear masks. But what we know that all of these vaccines do, it doesn't matter whether it's Pfizer or Moderna or AstraZeneca, what they do, even if you get it and you've already had the vaccine, is that you don't get the fatal complications. There have been, I think, looking at the data, and I'm not an expert, but that's the real game changer, that even if you get it, you don't end up in hospital. And so the idea, of course, is regardless of whether you spread or not, once you're inoculated, if everybody gets inoculated, then we're just not going to have this primary concern of the ICUs being overwhelmed and the hospitals being overwhelmed. And so, I guess my own personal thing would be, there was a whole thing about AstraZeneca and is it causing blood clots and yada, yada, yada. And I looked at it. My opportunity was to get the AstraZeneca fastest, waiting my turn. I didn't get any special consideration. And I looked over the stuff and I went, the odds make so much sense for me, being 68 years old and having had a stroke, to have AstraZeneca. I'm not going to wait another week for the Pfizer. Right? My wife did. My wife waited till today and got the Pfizer, because in Ontario the government's using Pfizer and Moderna, primarily Pfizer, and the pharmacies have been given AstraZeneca. And so I just went, no, I want this as soon as I can get it. I don't care that it's quite as effective as the Pfizer, because the big thing I looked at was, even if I get it, I'm not going to end up in hospital and I'm not going to end up dead. Now, look, the other issue you have to deal with, and you have to be honest with people, is that vaccines are safe in the same way that flying is safe. That doesn't mean there's no risk. There have always been risks with all vaccines of rare side effects. In Ontario, Canada right now, last I looked, and it's a little dated, it was 80 severe adverse effects per, I think it was a million people. And not all those are fatal. The most common one is you have a violent allergic reaction. The issue there is that we have to help people who that happens to, because the way our laws are structured all over Canada and really all over the world, you can't sue the vaccine manufacturers. Not just for these COVID, we've never been able to sue them in any real way. You'd have to prove negligence to the nth degree. But the reality is, a few people are severely affected, and tragically, some people die. And so, what a number of countries have done.
Rare, Carly. They keep saying, "Oh, it's rare, it's rare." I have a rare blood disorder. Look how many people have it. More people drop dead from the Gardasil injection than could have ever gotten cervical cancer.
Well, okay, now you're at the
and they've never proved the causal link between HPV and cervical cancer.
Exceptions to the rule, and you know, and I know, life is risk versus reward. If we want to keep everybody safe all the time, we wouldn't allow cars to drive over 60 miles an hour on the highway. We wouldn't allow anybody to drive a car. We wouldn't fly. Everything is risk versus reward. And here, the reward of getting this under control is so astronomically superior to what we're dealing with now, that the logical thing is, whatever vaccine they're giving you that's been approved, take it. I'm not in favor of mandatory vaccines. I don't think that'll help. But I hope that, as you just said, most people come to the inescapable logic that getting a vaccine as quickly as possible and getting your second dose as quickly as possible is what we need to do. And that means the provinces and the federal government have to stop fighting, have to stop blaming each other. You know, Doug Ford in Ontario stopped saying that there aren't enough vaccines. We know what happened there. You know, everybody knows why that happened. It's in the past. And the feds, stop saying that Ontario isn't delivering the vaccines fast enough or the provinces aren't, because that's not true. That's utter nonsense. And work together. If the federal government, like the health ministry, is concerned that the provinces aren't getting vaccines into people's arms quickly enough, fine. Then, as the Prime Minister said a couple days ago, and I hope he follows through, talk to the provinces about how you, the federal government, can help them get these vaccines delivered. Because guess what? When 2 million vaccines arrive at an airport in the dead of night, the vaccine ferry doesn't put them into people's arms. They have to be taken, they have to be assigned, and it's work, and it takes time. For example, like the health minister said, well, Ontario's received, I can't remember how many, 3.5 million. We have 1.4 million vaccines that are in freezers waiting to be distributed, as if that's some great failure. I just looked up the numbers for the United States. They have 45 million vaccines in freezers because it takes time once you get the thing to distribute it. So you
gotta put them somewhere when they arrive. They made a big deal about the Ontario thing, but half those vaccines that were in freezers went into the freezers less than 48 hours before the federal minister talked about it. Anyway, none of that helps.
If you look at the Ontario rate, it's exactly at the national average. There are some provinces that have done better. Saskatchewan's doing very well. And there are some provinces that aren't doing this, but it's all because nobody's trying to kill people here. It's that each province faces different challenges. And you're absolutely right.
No one's trying to kill people, but I can't kill them for but I can't. So just hang on for a second. Sure. I'll be right back with you. We'll talk about Canada, but we also have to talk about Brazil, because there's something very important going on there that's impacting the rest of the world, and the world includes Canada. Roy Goldstein of the Toronto Sun with yours truly, Charles Adler. Naheed Nenshi, the mayor of Calgary, the outgoing mayor of Calgary, will be joining us in 20 minutes from right now. This is Charles Adler Tonight.
It's about time for a refresh, regain momentum, reconnect with your customers, reach new ones. Whether they're listening, watching, or clicking, we're here to help you press refresh on your business. CoresCreative.ca.
When your bank account does more. A CIBC spokesperson says the bank is currently gathering input from its senior leaders about how their teams work to ensure the return to office plans keep employees engaged and connected. At the Business Center, I'm Chris McCusker. Still to come, we're breaking down today's top stories. At Sleep Country, we wish your old bed well, but
You idiot! No, I don't want to go back in the past. I've been there. Well, you never know the old place. Come on, this is for free. Oh, free? Any tips? Now you can pal. Come on, I'll show you some nice tricks. No, you will get me back in the past and then make me walk home. Oh, no tricks on our first week. I can go find friends. That wouldn't be showing the right experience. You get it? Look.
your data plan holds you back. Get it?
And easy. We talked to Monica Starks, who needed to hire for a pivotal role at her company, GS.
When you need it. It's enough to stream a movie and a sequel. All you have to worry about is deciding what to watch on all voice and data plans, only with Fido. Visit a Fido store or fido.ca for details.
Toronto's news. Now, this is 680 News.
It's 13 degrees and clear in Toronto. Good evening. I'm Michelle Morton.
I'm Scott Burnett. Here are the top stories right now.
The province is moving to a stay-at-home order at midnight. You're only allowed to go out for essential trips such as work, picking up groceries, and exercise, sparking mixed reaction. Health officials applauding the order, while the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says this will be devastating. The Premier says by the end of the month, along a stay-at-home order, about 40% of Ontarians will have their first dose of a vaccine, and the Ford government announced plans to start vaccinating those 18 years and older living in hotspots. Despite Toronto and Peel region pivoting students to online learning, the Education Minister says the rest of the schools in the province will be staying open. Stephen Lecce says schools have demonstrated resilience and worked hard in keeping COVID-19 out of their buildings.
Sleeping? Then this is definitely the podcast for you. Just like the name. You hear a story, nothing much happens, but you feel good. And then you fall asleep. It's all waiting for you now, for free, at CuriousCast.ca and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The rumors are true. The True Tone Electronics showroom is open at limited capacity. Stop in and check out the latest in TVs, sound systems, electronics, and so much more. At True Tone Electronics, they're doing everything possible to keep their staff and customers safe. They ask that you please wear a mask or face covering and keep a safe distance when visiting the showroom. It's been a while, and they look forward to seeing you in person. True Tone Electronics, 980 Dundas Street East in Mississauga, and online at truetone.ca.
Oh, great. I got a chance to get out of town early. My car battery decides to pack it in. Thanks for holding us up. Rush hour's building and I'm stuck. Oh, but not for long. I got Abrams towing in my phone. Abrams recruits only the best drivers, fully licensed and insured. With Abrams, I know I won't get ripped off. You need a tow? I'm good. Call Abrams.
You can trust Abrams Towing. Put it in your phone now. 416-398-2500. 416-398-2500.
I have sleep apnea and use a CPAP machine. I like the benefits, but worry about disinfecting it properly.
If you're concerned about cleaning your CPAP mask and hoses, why not try Dr. Les Premer's custom-made oral appliance? It's comfortable, portable, and easy to clean. Find out more at dentalstoringsolutions.ca or call Dr. Les Premer at 416-224-9998. That's 224-9998.
I'm Dr. Les Premer, and I'd like to give you and your family a good night's sleep.
I was mocked in the classroom.
Attacked on the bus.
Pushed down on the sidewalk.
We are
your neighbors.
Fathers and sons.
Mothers, daughters. Girl Scouts and Little Leaguers.
We are
the so-called quiet, docile ones.
We live in fear, but hide behind soft smiles.
We are being targeted, attacked, killed.
We are
the Asian community. And we are hurting.
Stand with us.
Follow #StopAsianHate today.
This is Charles Adler Tonight. Once again, here is Charles Adler.
Ordinarily, it's a plum job to be a bureau chief for a national newspaper in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. But it's not a plum job these days because of how dangerous Brazil is. And Terrence McCoy of the Washington Post writes tonight, I don't think people are quite getting how significant the arrival of the P1 variant has changed the game in Brazil, signaling a much darker phase. So they had more than 4,000 deaths in just 24 hours. More than half of the people arriving in hospital are now under the age of 50. Some of it is happening in Canada. It's likely more of it. I don't want to believe this, but the facts are the facts. It's likely more of it will be happening in Canada. Laurie Goldstein of the Toronto Sun. The story in Brazil is something I don't think any of us want repeated in any country, but I know that we're going to get some of this. We already have some of it right now, where not only are they younger, more than half of the people arriving in hospital are now under the age of 50. Some of it is happening in Canada. It's likely more of it. I don't want to believe this, but the facts are the facts. It's likely more of it will be happening in Canada. Laurie Goldstein of the Toronto Sun. The story in Brazil is something I don't think any of us want repeated in any country, but I know that we're going to get some of this. We already have some of it right now, where not only are they younger, but they're also much sicker. What do you make of Canada's opportunity to not get what Brazil has in spades?
Well, yeah, the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday, and I'll just read you the lead. Canada's West Coast province of British Columbia is struggling to contain the spread of a highly contagious coronavirus variant that originated in Brazil. And experts say that the country's relatively slow vaccination rollout could leave it vulnerable to a wider spread. So it is here. It is in British Columbia in a significant way, which means it's going to be, in a significant way in Canada. And I think it's this race between the variants and the vaccines. And right now, the problem is that, look, let's agree on everything. We need to get these vaccines into people's arms faster. Now, we are going to get more. I mean, obviously, it's ramping up now. The federal government is talking about millions of doses. But you see, this to me this is job one. The Brazil variant, which what the experts are saying, is more contagious, possibly more death people. I mean, that's terrifying. It's already overwhelmed the system in Brazil. Now, there are a number of reasons for that. I mean, they have a leader who doesn't think this is really happening and is keeping everything wide open. But regardless of that, it just puts more pressure on that we need these vaccines out as quickly as possible. So I don't really have another answer. You can lock everything down, but as I say, we've had more lockdowns in Ontario than anywhere, and in Ontario we've had more in Toronto than anywhere. And our lockdowns, such as they are, we're the most locked down city in North America. And and willing to put people, unless you're willing to do what the Chinese government did, which we're not going to do. We're not going to weld people in their homes. We're not going to haul them out, police dragging out people suspected of being sick because their neighbors think on them. It's not going to happen. So it just comes back to what I'm saying. We can do everything else. We can talk about everything else. But unless we up our rate of vaccination quickly, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble.
I just want to ask you this, because attitudes make a difference. Is it possible that Canada, because of what was going on in America, and it wasn't going on at the same rate in Canada, is it possible that we fell into the typical historic Canadian trap of complacency and smugness? And are we paying a high price for that right now?
I would say that's absolutely true. To be fair, let's be fair. The Trudeau government did a better job than the U.S. did Donald Trump. You just look at the infection rates and how they compared. And, unless you think this is all a hoax and it's all done by the black helicopter guys in the UN, you know that. But the problem is, I think, we always looked at this thing. You remember at the beginning, we would take 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And nobody expected that this time, more than a year later, we would still be basically caught. And so I think we did, because we compare ourselves to the United States. really two countries, the United States and the United Kingdom. And right now, the U.S. is, okay, they're worse than us, that's true. But now they're vaccinating at twice the rate we are. The U.K. Was worse than us, no doubt about it. But now they're vaccinating at 3 times the rate that we are. And they're doing better if they're new infections.
This person in real life.
America's a superpower. Britain used to be a superpower. Something superpowers have in common.
This person in real life is telling people that they're black.
They get it done. And right now, the Americans and the Brits are possessed by a mission to get as many jabs in people's arms as possible. And guess what? They do it.
Yep, and you know, it's and you know, I don't want to get into how we got here about the shortage. We all know how it happened, and you know, we debated it up the wazoo and who did what. My philosophy is, look, that's in the past. We know why we're in this pickle, so let's start working. My fear is that, you know, can Confederation work in the greatest public health emergency of the modern era? Or are we just going to have this sniping back and forth and laying blame rather than solving the problem? Because that's what I see, and I hope it's dissipating. But it's like all levels of government, the federal and the provincial, they know we're in huge trouble. And what does their priority seem to be? It's let's blame the other guys. You know, the health minister.
Seems, you know, you talk about superpowers, that seems so small. I mean, think about it. People are literally dying. People are getting sick for a long time. Some of the people who are getting very sick are much younger than was the case a few months ago. And we're still doing this snipping and sniping. It just feels so small when you compare it to the larger problem. Lori, I want to thank you for the call and the conversation. I just want to give you 25 seconds for the last word.
The last one I got is that our politicians need to do what we've hired them to do. We're facing a genuine public health crisis.
We see you. We know. We know. You're mad at what I'm saying. Makes you look fucking stupid.
To save the lives of the Canadians. What more important job do you have?
Well said, as always. Lori Goldstein, my friend, thank you very much. Goldstein, columnist of the Toronto Sun. In just a few moments, the most articulate servant in Canada, and a conversation with him about his decision. Next on Charles Antler tonight.
I'm Cara Zor-El. Supergirl.
Suit up with Showcase.
Supergirl, it's time to rumble.
For the final season of Supergirl.
I'm going to be doing my job with heart and integrity, and I'm going to be doing it well. I'm ready for the justice. Truth and justice always prevail. I'm Supergirl, and I don't hide from anything.
Supergirl, all new, Tuesdays on Showcase. Also available through Stack TV.
Unsure of what's causing your pain? Or if you've been given the right diagnosis? See Dr. Lou Nally with your pain or injury problems, or for a free second opinion about your pain. Call Dr. Lou now at Pinpoint Health, 1-855-55-DRLOU, or visit pinpointhealth.ca.
Don't miss the Pinpoint Health Show with Dr. Lou every Saturday morning at 11. And for answers anytime, call 1-855-55-DR-LOU or pinpointhealth.ca.
I'm Joseph Newberger, criminal defense lawyer. In life, you can face unexpected events, especially during stressful times. If you are facing a criminal charge, it is crucial to hire a highly experienced criminal lawyer. At Newberger & Partners, we take a team approach to successfully protecting your rights. If your future is on the line, we're here to help. Please contact us for consultation at 416-364-3111 or at nrlawyers.com. That's nrlawyers.com.
This fucking idiot here. All 8 accounts or whatever. The same fucking guy.
Pretty good. What if I said fix the variable? 3 years or 5? 10, 25%, or maybe no down payment at all.
The same idiot that showed us where the link was so you got it off Tor. He called it an IP grabber. That's not a thing.
You want to make the most important financial
but
decision
it's the
of
type
your
of
life.
thing you would call
we
it.
want to help you make it, no matter what your finances
would call it to get an
Northwood
idiot like this.
416-969-8130. Or visit us online at northwoodmortgage.com. License 10349.
Thanks for calling 1-800-GOT-JUNK. This is Sarah. How can I help?
First I pointed, then the junk disappeared. But the sparkle sound came a little bit late. So I said, you should probably make that sparkle sound a little bit quicker. And then Charlotte materialized out of thin air and said,
Never hesitate to trade your cow for a handful of magic beans.
I love 1-800-GOT-JUNK. When you want junk to dislike junk, or visit us at onejunk.com.
Hey, Cuckoo, what do you tell a teenager about cannabis?
Okay, I'm playing Haboot Canopy. Music.
The music. Looking for tips on how to talk with your teens about cannabis? Visit drugfreekidscanada.org for more tools to help start the conversation. drugfreekidscanada.org.
I don't believe how overloaded the system is. No inputs whatsoever.
This is CFMJ Global News Radio.
No inputs whatsoever. I've watched every goddamn function on the screen go on. You're so skilled, Chomo. You're so skilled, Chomo.
News. I'm Skylar Peters. On rule breakers in a race against COVID-19 and its variants.
Things are extremely serious right now. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says his province is facing a life-and-death situation that's evolving rapidly. And he says he's active to protect hospitals and hospital workers from being overwhelmed. I'm declaring a state of emergency with the province-wide stay-at-home order. The announcement means standing by its emergency recommendation.
God, dump on the phone and on this machine and say to do it all at the same time.
People get at least one shot in the arm faster. Terry Pibble, the Canadian Press.
Quebec is rolling out tighter restrictions on gyms, faith gatherings, and interregional travel. And on Friday, Alberta is shutting down indoor dining after curbing retail capacity and indoor fitness activity yesterday. Officials in British Columbia say almost 20% of residents who are eligible for a vaccine have had a shot. The good news came in a joint statement from provincial health Officer Dr. 6,096 doses of the 3 vaccines have been administered, and of those, more than 87,000 were second doses. Another 997 cases were reported, with 2 more deaths on Wednesday. While Canada is a long way off from producing COVID-19 vaccines, the first N95 masks have rolled off a domestic assembly line. Global's Rick Zamprin reports.
The federal and Ontario governments are calling the domestic mass production a step toward better pandemic protection for Canada now and into the future. Masks are being produced by 3M Canada as part of a multi-billion-dollar deal announced last August. Each level of government contributed $23.3 million toward the production expansion at the company's plant in Brockville, about an hour south of Ottawa. For the next 5 years, the federal government will receive 30 million masks annually, and Ontario will get 25 million. Rick Zamprin, Global News.
The Biden administration and allies in the states are combating vaccine hesitance. The vaccination rate for this top priority group is reaching a plateau, even as supplies have dramatically expanded. Federal officials say about 76% of Americans aged 65 and older have received at least 1 dose of a vaccine, but the rate of new vaccinations among the group has slowed in recent weeks.
Wow, you're angry. Look at you. How many pictures in a row are you going to show me with my eyes closed,
says the federal NDP and the Green Party of Canada could have a shot at dozens more seats if they formed an alliance.
So it's that kid's fault that your whole life what?
Canada is urging party leaders to work together on the issue of climate change in the next general election.
If you imagine.
And was asked by state lawyers.
He literally spent the 7.5 minutes of commercials trying to stop me from what? There's no other station to place.
That Mr. Floyd had said something like, "I ain't do no drugs." It's a
balance passive protection forms, preserving by
for more than 9 minutes.
We're at the exact same point we would have
on him.
if you've done nothing.
News from the
You've done
BBC.
nothing, bro.
The British government has again suspended funding for the aid agency Oxfam after fresh allegations of misconduct involving staff working in Central Africa. 2 members of staff were suspended last week following allegations of bullying and sexual exploitation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The British government says it'll provide targeted help to the hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong citizens expected to move to the UK using a special visa. 1/3 of a million Hong Kong citizens are expected to settle in Britain over the next 5 years. The Chinese government has introduced a security law in Hong Kong which restricts long-standing democratic freedoms. The British Cabinet Minister Robert Jenrick said the new arrivals will be offered full support as needed.
We think that most of those who choose to come to the UK will in fact be people who will contribute a great deal to the United Kingdom, will be professionals or will set up businesses or will want to make a real success of their time here. But if they struggle, then we're here to support them, and that means local councils being there to provide them with housing, with the benefit system standing behind them, and with all the support the state can offer to make sure that...
So the president's been said again, if the UK can extend citizenship to this
emergency
people based on
talks in
nothing, so can the
Mozambique later
Netherlands.
today on how to respond to a wave of jihadist attacks in the country. This comes 2 weeks after militants linked to the Islamic State group laid siege to the coastal town of Palma. The town is the site of a natural gas plant said to be Africa's biggest private investment. Police in California say the golfer Tiger Woods was driving at nearly double the speed limit before a crash that left him seriously injured. The Los Angeles County Sheriff said Woods' car had been traveling at more than 130 kilometers an hour when it careered off the road in February. BBC World News.
Hello, I'm Jackie Leonard, and you're listening to the newsroom from the BBC World Service. The ambassador of Myanmar to the United Kingdom, appointed long before the latest military coup, has effectively been locked out of his own embassy in London by the country's military attaché. Cho Swan Min, himself a former army colonel, was told he was no longer the representative of Myanmar. The move follows comments he's made since the coup, calling for the release of civilian leaders and warning Myanmar could be at risk of civil war. On Wednesday evening, staff were asked to leave the premises and British police were called in to prevent any attempts to re-enter the building. With more details, here's Mark Lobel.
Locked out of the embassy he headed, Cho Swan Min claims there's been a mini coup on the streets of London.
They occupy my building. I'm ambassador of Myanmar.
And have you asked the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, about this situation?
Yeah, we are waiting for the inspection.
Ambassador here since 2014, Cho Swan Min won praise from Britain's Foreign Secretary by calling for the release of Myanmar's democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who appointed him, and for restraint, a more moderate call to arms than Myanmar's former ambassador to the UN's plea for the army to be removed from power, but also one falling on deaf ears. This, ostensibly his punishment for speaking out and perhaps a warning to others around the world. Police were called following protests outside the embassy after reports its military attaché had locked the ambassador and staff out of the building. It's the latest act by Myanmar's ruthless military since their February the 1st coup, sparking protests across the country. With over 570 deaths, including dozens of children so far, the army's behavior is now being documented by lawyers on behalf of the civilian government and being handed to the UN. As the standoff in London continued, its UK ambassador, at least until Wednesday, sat in his car waiting to be let back in, having refused an earlier summons back to his country from the military after his earlier criticisms of them. The UK Foreign Office say they're seeking further information about the incident, are in touch with the Myanmar regime, and hope for a calm and prompt resolution to the situation.
This is interesting.
That was Mark Lobel. I ate too many drugs, or I ain't do no drugs. Two interpretations of muffled audio of George Floyd moments before his death. What he said is key evidence in the trial of the former police officer accused of killing him. The defence say that Mr. Floyd didn't die because of Derek Chauvin's knee pressing against his neck for 9 minutes, but because of drugs in his body. The chief investigator, James Reyerson, initially agreed with that argument, but in a dramatic change in testimony, he corrected himself on the stand when re-examined by the prosecution.
Having heard it in context, you're able to tell what Mr. Floyd is saying there?
Yes, I believe Mr. Floyd is saying, I ain't doing no drugs.
That's a little different than what you were asked about when you only saw a portion of the video, correct?
Yes, sir.
So how much weight will the testimony of this witness now have? A question for our US correspondent, Lebu Diseko.
Well, I think for Derek Chauvin's lawyers, they would have been very, very pleased when at first they heard James Reyerson, that chief investigator, almost agreeing with their position, essentially saying that George Floyd had said, "I ate too many drugs." And I would imagine equally they would have felt quite disappointed when on questioning again by the prosecutor after he was shown that longer video, he changed his conclusion on the stand there, saying that he thought Mr. Floyd had actually said, "I ain't do no drugs." Now, this is a central issue. The defense for Derek Chauvin, his lawyer, has been trying to put the argument that George Floyd could have died from the drugs in his system, and equally that the drugs in his system could have made him much more volatile, and therefore Derek Chauvin had to use the force that he did use. What other evidence do we hear today?
So this is the equivalent.
We also had some quite stunning evidence from Mackenzie Anderson. She's a forensic scientist from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. That's the same bureau as James Grayson, and they were investigating George Floyd's death. And she said initially when they searched George Floyd's car, they didn't take drugs that had been on the floor as evidence. It was only later the car was processed 2 times again later on, once after a request from the prosecution and once after a request from Derek Chauvin's lawyers, that they collected a number of pills and pill fragments, as well as packages of a substance called Suboxone. That is a opioid addiction medication. Those were found in the car. Now, she tested one of the pills and found that it had some of George Floyd's saliva on it. And there was also testimony from another forensic scientist who said that the pills in the Floyd car contained methamphetamine.
You throw it into the floor of his car, it's going to touch some of his spit.
Countries in Europe have failed to agree on who should receive the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Don't hear about drug slipping
down advice from the EU's drugs regulator that it should be given to all age groups. The European Medicines Agency said yesterday that very rare blood clots should be listed as a possible side effect of the vaccine, but that the benefits still outweigh the risks. A number of EU countries have restricted the use of the vaccine ahead of this safety review, with more following. Here's our Europe correspondent, Jean Mackenzie from Brussels.
Hey, remember O.J. Simpson? Yeah, chain of custody of the
video
evidence,
game sounding voices.
Really?
That would be kind of it.
There's no chain of custody of this evidence.
New protected marine areas, such as the proposal of the Nazca Dorsal National Reserve.
Shining on him and shining on us. And that is, what I always tried to do. And yeah, it became an issue. It got so much worse. In the run up to that 2017 election, it was rough. And I probably had a small handful of racist issues in the first, call it 6 years that I've been doing this work. And now, every day, unrelenting every day. And I said yesterday, it's okay. I'm a big boy. I got thick skin. I can handle it. And if I can get those arrows in my back and protect the young Muslim girl in the hijab walking down the street from harassment, it's okay. I'll take the arrows in my back. Or the arrows in my back. And someone corrected me and said, no, it's not okay. It's never okay. And ultimately, we're in a point in society right now, and, Charles, you know this better than anyone. It's been a lot of your own personal journey, where the intolerance has become unbelievable. But I remain incredibly optimistic. And I'm reminded of a professor of mine in my undergraduate, Dr. Ron Glassberg, one of the greatest professors ever at the University of Calgary, who talk about the cyclical nature of time. I know that sounds very heady for a Wednesday evening.
Heady, there's a made-up word.
He talks about how times of great tension.
What's heady mean, though?
Noriko Yoshinaka took the first train from Kyoto in order to be at the park on opening day. And this Yoshinaka said that
the electorate really meant business. Voter turnout exceeded 50% for the first time in a snap election for local officers. That's according to State Election Commission.
So a lot of people turned out. They cast their ballots. What's the wider significance?
Well, with the presidential election coming up in less than a year, these results point to a really unpredictable presidential poll next March. And this in turn shines the beginnings of a spotlight on one major upcoming campaign issue, and that's Seoul's foreign policy direction when it comes to dealing with its neighbours to the north and establishing a more harmonious dynamic with nuclear-armed Pyongyang. Now, Moon Jae-in came into power and he promised to generate jobs, crack down on corruption, and create a level playing field for all Koreans. And we saw those exact issues play out on a micro level in mayoral elections, particularly, in fact, when it came to accusations of property speculation scandals among certain senior officials. Taking all of that into account, and the discontent over the perceived failures of current economic policies, Moon Jae-in's Democratic Party's position in the next election can be seen as far from secure. And that's before the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic is considered. Now, that's obviously still playing out, but is likely to be an issue of contention for voters.
That was Stephanie Prentice. This is the BBC World Service, and Neil has the headlines.
Myanmar's ambassador to London has been locked out of his embassy because of his opposition to the military coup. EU health ministers have failed to agree common rules on who should get the AstraZeneca COVID vaccine after regulators updated their advice to include blood clots as a rare side effect. And Argentina has announced restrictions to tackle a new wave of coronavirus infections that's sweeping South America.
The British government says it will provide targeted help to the hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong citizens expected to move to the UK using a special visa. This would include support with housing, schools and jobs. The British Cabinet Minister Robert Jenrick said it was important to make sure they were properly supported.
We've got a historical moral commitment to the people of Hong Kong. The BNO status holders I've met in recent days are teachers and doctors.
This experience is alive and well, where diamond education is only outdone by the sheer number of one-of-a-kind engagement rings, openly displayed for your viewing and holding pleasure. Spence Diamonds. Find us in Vaughan, Scarborough, and Mississauga.
When the sun is rising and the birds are chirping, there's no better way to start the day than a good old freshly milked Jeff. And when it comes to car insurance, only the most oblivious Jeffs get milked. Jeffs who never shop around.
UK were demand to continue at this rate, arrivals would easily overtake the Home Office's estimate of up to 153,000 this year and 1,300,000 over 5 years. The government argues the UK has an historical and moral commitment to the people of Hong Kong and is establishing a support network across Britain for those who wish to leave the territory to start a new life here. 12 welcome hubs are being established to help provide access to housing, education and employment. Although the BNO visa states holders have no recourse to public funds in the UK, those who become destitute may be offered assistance to access social housing and other benefits.
Mark Easton. Now let's go to Northern Ireland. Another night of unrest in parts of Belfast. Police came under attack, petrol bombs and rocks were thrown, and a bus was hijacked and set on fire. There were also disturbances over the Easter weekend. The violence began over local political issues and concerns about the impact on Northern Ireland of Britain leaving the European Union, although some of the youths involved in the rioting are barely teenagers. Nicola Mallon, a minister in the Northern Ireland Assembly, condemned the attack.
So therefore, they have no interest at all in the future. You are stupid. You just said that.
In this incident, he is understandably very shaken, but thankfully he wasn't hurt, and thankfully there were no passengers on this particular bus. But the people who are behind this are attacking their own communities. It is achieving nothing, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop now before somebody is seriously hurt or killed.
Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy has been following events.
A double-decker bus was hijacked and set alight in the Shankill Road, a loyalist area in West Belfast, around 8 o'clock in the evening. The disorder escalated as a crowd broke through the gates of a peace wall at an interface between loyalist and Republican areas. Crowds of hundreds of young people gathered on each side, and for over an hour, petrol bombs, rocks and other missiles were launched to and fro over the wall. The Prime Minister said the way to resolve differences is through dialogue, not violence or criminality, while the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland, Simon Byrne, wrote on Twitter that his message to those engaged in violence was to go home before someone was seriously injured. Police also confirmed they'd received a report of an assault on a press photographer working for the local newspaper, the Belfast Telegraph.
Emma Vardy in Northern Ireland. Denmark was the world's top producer of mink for the luxury fur market. But last year, as the pandemic took its toll, all of the country's 17 million farmed mink were culled. The Danish government said a coronavirus variant found in mink and transmissible
You
to
almost
people might
had a
interfere with
chance
the
to study
efficacy
herd
of any
immunity.
vaccine
You fucked it
developed
up. And what did you do? You went in
After
hacking
the
and
cull,
slashing blood
breeding
everywhere.
mink was prohibited.
You got
Many
fluid
Danes
somewhere
hoping
in
the
you.
ban will remain and fur farming will become illegal as it is in the UK and Austria. But some hope the industry will be revived next year. Linda Presley reports.
So what I do is that I wet the leather side of the skin.
Thea Larsson's a Copenhagen-based master farrier with Saga furs. Over video phone from London, she shows me how she works with the fur from a mink.
It soaks into the leather and makes it stretchable.
And the idea of that is to kind of make the fur go further, if you like.
Yeah, and I can shape the skins a bit if I want to have a round color.
Tell me how you felt when you heard that announcement from your Prime Minister on the 4th of November that all of Danish mink would be killed.
I trust the Danish government and the scientists because that's what we're used to doing in Denmark. But then when more and more information came out, I was just really disappointed. It could have been handled in many ways so the farmers could continue after a couple of years, but now they killed all the animals instead of giving them permission to keep a breeding stock.
The science on which the cull was based has continued to be questioned. And many Danes also wonder if the wholesale slaughter might have been based on an anti-fur political agenda.
That is not
just stupid white people.
Mette Gjerskov doesn't speak for the ruling Social Democrat government, but she is the party spokesperson on the environment and a former Minister for Agriculture, Food and Fisheries.
I saw this as a very, very hard decision, taking away people's livelihoods.
What did you base it on?
I'm convinced that our Prime Minister, she did it because she thought it was necessary.
A parliamentary commission will hear evidence about the legality of the cull. Others are more concerned about making the prohibition on the fur industry permanent.
We shouldn't have allowed this industry to keep going. We should have banned it.
Jo Vindings, the director of the animal rights NGO Anima.
Because once you do have that many animals living in cages, the only thing you can do to end the cycle is to kill the animals.
I'm 32. I've dealt with mink my whole life. It's not really work, it's a lifestyle. When you're dealing with animals, you never have time off.
Jesper Thorsson's determined to reclaim his identity as a mink farmer. He's one of a reported 60 farmers planning to import breeding animals back into Denmark next year. So why has he chosen not to take the generous compensation package on offer?
Because being a mink farmer is more or less like you have to be slightly crazy or mad, and I guess I'm just mad enough to want to get going again.
That report from Linda Presley. Now, Neil has some of the other stories we're watching today.
President Joe Biden is set to unveil a package of executive actions to curb gun violence in the U.S. later on Thursday, including cracking down on homemade and unregistered guns. The announcement will come nearly 3 months into Mr. Biden's term, a delay that's been criticized by activists who wanted the president to fulfill a campaign pledge to take action on gun violence on his first day in office. The announcement follows mass shootings in Colorado, Georgia, and California. South Carolina has gone a step further towards approving the state's first hate crime legislation. The bill, whose second reading was approved in the state's House of Representatives, will increase fines and jail time for those who commit violent crimes based on a victim's race, religion, sex, gender, age, national origin, and sexual orientation. South Carolina is just one of 3 U.S. states not to have such legislation. A couple in Maine have hidden $20,000 somewhere in the U.S. state and invited treasure hunters to find it.
You're trying
the couple say they spent 3 years exploring and photographing locations before creating an elaborate hide-and-seek game, which is intended to celebrate Maine's 200 years of statehood. And Sports Illustrated magazine could feature its first male model in its upcoming 2021 swimsuit issue.
The number one reason people don't get involved in their community is not, I don't have time, I don't have money, I don't have interest. It's nobody asked me. And so, the whole time I've been mayor, I've had a program called 3 Things for Canada. where we just simply reach out to every Canadian and ask every citizen to do 3 acts of community service, large or small, every year.
Every
But what I
year.
also learned in that work
Do
is
one
that
good thing every
while
4
it's
months
quite
and you're
easy
good.
to get people involved in their communities, it's actually very hard to get people involved in politics. And back in 2009, I spent the better part of a year trying to talk other people into running for city council and running for mayor.
Really tempted
And
to
I
watch
struck out
like
every single
Nazi
time.
conspiracy
Every
videos.
single person said no. And I particularly struck out with women. And I often joke that I'm used to striking out with women, but this was different.
What?
A lot of women said, look, there was no room for me in this crazy world of dog-eat-dog politics. And I kept saying, look, things can be different if we elect better people. The system is not fixed. We can change it. And enough people said to me, put your money where your mouth is.
We escaped with a very, very good result, but it's quarterfinal, and we have to keep on going. It will be necessary to.
And I can enjoy kissing babies and shaking hands and puppies and rainbows and children and all these things that I do not like. I always make that joke when I talk to students, and they usually stop and go, "You don't like children?" Anyway, I've learned to love all of those things. But
I wish we had more time. I know I always say that.
We're running out of time already.
The clock is such a confiner, you know.
Let me really finish then. I'll get to the very end by saying, if I've done anything to inspire people that a world of public service and political life is a good world for them, then I will have succeeded.
Outgoing mayor of Cal.
Hi, it's Fido. When it comes to downloading...
This is Cal from Calgary.
Behold, at any time,
here with Al from Alberta,
jump
and
out
Ed
and get
from
you.
Edmonton,
It's just very
Tim
tough to
from
win.
Timmins.
I mean, to win once and especially multiple times.
And in tennis, there was a shock defeat for the number 2 seed Sophia Kenin at the Charleston Open. The former Australian Open champion, who had a bye in the first round, was beaten in 3 sets by fellow American Lauren Davis. No such problems, though, for the top seed Ash Barty. The world number 1 from Australia cruised into the 3rd round, thrashing Japan's Misaki Doi for the loss of just 3 games. Barty won it 6-2, 6-1 in just 61 minutes.
Adi, thank you. That was Adi Doi. China's e-commerce and courier industry has experienced a boom in recent years. According to the State Post Bureau, the country handled over 80 billion parcels last year, and that number is expected to rise this year. But while parcel delivery might have made people's lives easier, the rise in excess packaging is posing an environmental problem, and regulators want to crack down on it, as our China media analyst Kerry Allen reports.
The regulator of China's postal industry is set to launch a huge anti-excess campaign later this month, and it's going to particularly target parcel packaging. It's going to be a year-long campaign which very much tackles what the country sees as inappropriate packaging. If you think about some of the parcels you sometimes get from overseas, sometimes there's a lot of tape on them, or there might be a lot of bubble wrap. Instead, it's going to be promoting this more environmentally friendly packaging. And in fact, guidelines have already been issued on what parcels should be packaged like by the Ministry of Transport. Companies that violate these regulations could face huge fines, up to 10,000 yuan, which are roughly $1,500. And that could have a huge knock-on impact in terms of smaller companies, in terms of what they're offering to overseas consumers. They might start offering goods in bulk rather than individually. And they might start thinking about potential price hikes to deal with the consequences of these new fines. There's been a lot of discussion about this on Chinese social media platforms like Sina Weibo.
Not to do with the expense.
Not a lot of people agree with this, particularly because in China, a lot of goods are delivered on the back of a motorbike, so they need to be very, very well wrapped so that they don't get damaged. But other people do think that as China is one of the world's biggest manufacturers, it also needs to show the most environmental consciousness.
Kerry Allen. And a quick reminder of our main world news just now. Myanmar's ambassador to London's been locked out of his embassy because of his opposition to the military coup. Stay with us if you can. We'll have a news summary in just a moment. I'm Jackie Leonard, and that was the newsroom.
Distribution of the BBC World Service in the U.S. is supported by Magoosh, online test prep.
Quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest.
When we're dry.